He respectfully gave it. I fired him because of what he said to Mike Pence. Very simple.
All right, the White House line has always been President Trump fired Michael Flynn because, as you heard there, he lied to Vice President Pence. That's their story, and they've always stuck to it. Until, randomly, this past December, 10 months later, and the day after news broke that Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to the FBI and was cooperating with the Mueller investigation. Then, out of nowhere, the story changes, because that is when Trump tweeted, "I had to fire General Flynn because he lied to the Vice President and the FBI." Okay, that tweet made some news, because if the president knew Flynn lied to the FBI when he fired him, then that means the president knew Flynn lied to the FBI when he met with FBI Director James Comey the next day, and when he asked him, according to Comey, to drop the investigation of Flynn. That moment, asking your FBI director to not pursue a criminal infraction you know happened, well, that sounds a lot like obstruction of justice. Which might explain why, soon after that tweet blew up, Trump's lawyer John Dowd rides to the rescue, making the somewhat implausible claim that he wrote the tweet. No, not Trump. It was this lawyer out of nowhere for no reason who just decided to tweet in his client's name who made this sloppy and unfortunate mistake. Okay, sure. But what we have learned today fills in some of the holes about what Trump knew when he fired Mike Flynn and when he knew it. It all took place during a 20-day period in early 2017. January 24th, the FBI comes to the White House and interviews National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. This is 2 days after he's been sworn into that position. This is the interview in which Flynn lies to the FBI about his conversations with the Russian ambassador Sergei Kislyak. These are the lies for which he was later indicted. Flynn reportedly tells no one else at the White House about this FBI interview. 2 days later, January 26th, the acting Attorney General, Sally Yates, with an aide, goes to the White House to tell White House counsel Don McGahn that based on intelligence agency, Flynn lied to Mike Pence about not discussing sanctions with Kislyak, which, in case it's not clear, is a very big deal to her. She's over there basically to warn them. But Yates also told McGahn something else.
We also told the White House counsel that General Flynn had been interviewed by the FBI. Mr. McGahn asked me how he did, and I declined to give him an answer to that. Mr. McGahn called me back the next morning. One of the questions that Mr. McGahn asked me when I went back over the second day was essentially, why does it matter to DOJ if one White House official lies to another White House official?
Okay, so as you just heard, McGahn called Yates back to the White House the next day, January 27th, with further questions about Flynn. That was a morning meeting. They're talking in the morning. And then that very same day, around lunchtime, so presumably shortly after Yates and McGahn wrap up talking, the president, out of nowhere, invites James Comey over to the White House for dinner, according to Comey.
He called me at my desk at lunchtime and asked me, was I free for dinner that night? And called himself and said, can you come over for dinner tonight? And I said, yes, sir.
That evening, January 27th, President Trump and Comey have dinner at the White House, and that is when Comey says Trump asked for his loyalty. About 2 weeks later, February 13th, President Trump fires Flynn on the same day the Washington Post reports the White House had known for weeks about what was really discussed in the Flynn-Kislyak conversations. February 14th, the very next day, in an Oval Office meeting, Trump asks Comey to end the investigation of Flynn, according to Comey. MSNBC legal analyst Nick Ackerman, former assistant special prosecutor for Watergate, joins me now, and man, oh man, whatever happened in the underlying Russia question, and this all relates, right, because the lies are about that.
Sure.
But just this set of facts, the fact that he said in the interview with Lester Holt, I fired him over the Russia thing, asking Andy McCabe on his first day he voted for, it really does look like you've got a plausible case for obstruction. Face.
Beyond a reasonable doubt, I would say.
Oh, well, that's very confident of you.
Yeah, I'm very confident. I mean, what you didn't include in that timeline was the December 28th timeline when President Obama announced the sanctions on Russia for interfering in the election. That same day, there was a call between Flynn and Kislyak, the Russian ambassador.
Right.
Then Flynn, like a good soldier, calls all of his friends at the White House down at Mar-a-Lago to tell them that he got this call and what should I say in return?
Including chains of emails in which KT McFarland and others are saying, well, what, he's going to talk about sanctions. What should she say? What should she say? So they all knew.
They all knew. And you got to believe Donald Trump knew, too.
Right. That is not established, I should say.
It has not established.
Right.
But let's face it. He's the president. All these people work for the president. Where are they? Mar-a-Lago. He might have been playing golf, but I guarantee you at some point somebody filled him in on what was going on.
Let's say the president and his people tell Flynn, yeah, tell him, don't worry about the sanctions. We're going to rate, whatever he says about the sanctions. And then Flynn gets caught by the FBI, and he lies about it. They have the intercepts. The president does everything that we know he did with Comey, et cetera. Right. They don't fire Flynn. Ultimately, they do when it becomes public. Like, is that an obstruction case right there?
Yeah, that's an obstruction case.
Why?
Plus, you've got the material. Why? Because he's trying to stop the investigation into Flynn. He knows that Flynn lied. And that lie is extremely material because it relates to what occurred during the campaign and the coordination between Russia and the campaign.
Okay, now,
and Trump knows it.
Okay, well, now here's where stuff gets interesting and dicey. We saw a preview of what the argument's going to be from the president just now in that press gaggle. They're going to say, you haven't proved anything underlying. You have no smoking gun. There is no collusion. You're trying to get us on some fighting back. Do you think in the absence of establishing that the campaign was working with the Russian government to adversely affect the election, that they plausibly go after the president for obstruction?
Sure they can. I mean, that's what they did in Watergate. Very few of the top people, none of them were indicted for the break-in. They were all indicted for the cover-up. But here, I think you're going to have proof.
It's the origin of the phrase, right?
Right. I mean,
it's not the crime,
exactly.
Yeah.
I think you're going to have proof here of the underlying crime and the cover-up because what Flynn pled guilty to, the lie about sanctions related to the coordination between Russia and the campaign. So he's got a lot to say.
There's this question now about the president talking to Mueller, and they're sort of circling each other. You heard Bob Bauer here just a bit before. What would your advice be? I mean,
my advice to who? To the president?
To the president of the United States. I mean, if you're a very accomplished lawyer, what do you say? Like, don't do whatever you can, avoid it, right?
Take the fifth. What choice do you have? A truthful answer would tend to incriminate you. There is no way.
You think you tell him to take the fifth? I mean,
sure,
you have
I
to
would
know what the underlying facts are. But
well, I still would. I mean, there's no way you wouldn't tell this particular client to take the fifth. But he's in a difficult position. He's not just like any white-collar criminal, because if he takes the fifth, he's basically saying, I'm guilty. He's the president of the United States.
I mean, the president can't take the fifth.
No, of course not.
I mean, even Nixon didn't do that.
No, none of Nixon's people did. That's why they all went in, testified before the grand jury, and they were all convicted of perjury.
Right, because they didn't take the fifth.
Right, because they were stuck between a rock and a hard place.
Right, because you can't take the fifth because then you look guilty. Right. So, okay, but if you can't take the fifth, I mean, I guess the question is, I guess my sort of Trump radar, having watched him now operate in very close proximity day after day, I would love to, in 2 weeks, is Trump ease for no way in hell, right?
Right, exactly.
It's like, I just don't buy that he's going to do it. And I guess the question is there a way out short of taking the fifth for them not to talk to Mueller?
No, I don't think there is, because ultimately they can serve him with a grand jury subpoena. There isn't a court in the country that's not going to enforce that subpoena. This is U.S. v. Nixon all over again, where they forced President Nixon to produce his tapes. He has
you
got
think that
to
would
testify.
apply? You would think that would apply here? It would be black and white that a court would say, yes, you can subpoena the president of the United States.
Yes, it'd be 9-zip in the Supreme Court. They say that you can sue a president on a civil case, and the president has to respond to it.
So is that why they're negotiating in the first place about the terms of this?
Well,
I mean, because the backstop is compelled.
Okay, but you're assuming they're negotiating. I mean, the fact is, Mueller has all the cards. At the end of the day, he's got a grand jury subpoena. I think that the most they're going to give in is to say, okay, we'll do this in a conference room at the White House, but it's going to be under oath, and it's going to be videotaped, because this is a guy who's going to claim even the transcript isn't truthful, and will even claim that the videotape isn't really him.
I had not countered that, but of course, Bill Clinton, when he was deposed, there was videotape. And
exactly.
I imagine they're going to push for that here as well, which is a remarkable thing to consider. Nick Ackerman, thank you.
Thank you.
Coming up, the conspiracy theories exploding from Trump TV.